In the early months of 2010, I was working as a server at a small, local diner. The place was humble, not a fancy restaurant, but it had a charm to it. Our closing hours were at 10 p.m., but I usually stayed until 11 to clean up the back room. It was just another quiet night when I locked up the diner around 10 and started wiping down the tables, preparing to head home soon. The usual calm settled over the place, but only for a few moments. Suddenly, a series of loud knocks echoed from the front door, catching me off guard. I looked up, startled, and saw a man standing outside, staring through the glass. I calmly called out to him, telling him that we were closed for the night. This wasn't unusual, it had happened before, and I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. However, the man didn't seem to acknowledge my words at first. He stood there for a few seconds, unblinking, as if he didn't understand. I decided to walk up to the door and, in a firmer voice, repeated, "Sorry, we're closed. No more orders tonight." This time, I made sure he heard me loud and clear. The man didn't respond right away, but after a few moments he gave a small, almost eerie smile before turning and walking away. I figured he might have been drunk or just a little confused. I didn't think much more of it, returning to my cleaning as usual. About 15 minutes later, as I was finishing up at the front counter, I glanced up and froze. There, once again, was the same man, standing right outside, looking through the door at me. This time, I was annoyed. I hadn't dealt with anyone acting so strange in the past, and it was starting to feel unsettling. I raised both of my arms in a gesture that said, "What are you doing?" He didn't budge. Instead, he knocked again, harder this time. My annoyance shifted to concern, and I spoke firmly. "I've told you already, we're closed. You need to leave now." This time, the man tensed up, his demeanor shifting. It was as if my words had finally gotten through. But then he did something unexpected. He reached out and pushed on the door lightly, testing if it was locked. The door didn't budge. He seemed frustrated and, after a moment of hesitation, walked away again. I quickly moved to the front windows, peering out into the parking lot, hoping he was finally leaving. But when I didn't see him, I assumed he was gone for good. It was already later than I wanted, and I was eager to finish up and leave. I sighed, checked the time, and started heading toward the counter again. Just as I was about to pick up a rag to finish wiping down the counter, a loud bang from the back door made my heart race. My blood went cold as I wasn't sure if the back door was locked. I immediately began to panic, but before I could process what was happening, the man started banging on the back door over and over again. A wave of panic surged through me. I was frozen for a second, but then I quickly realized the back door was locked. Still, I knew I couldn't just sit there and wait. I needed to get out of the diner before things escalated further. Without thinking twice, I bolted for the front door, not even bothering to lock it behind me. I ran as fast as I could to my car and, once safely inside, immediately called 911. It was a tense minute or two as I sat in my car, watching through the restaurant window. My heart was pounding in my chest. I could see the man moving around inside the diner now, peering through the windows, glancing at the counters. He walked over to the cash register and tried to open it. After a few moments of struggling, he gave up and disappeared into the back of the store. I could only hope he wasn't about to destroy anything else. The police arrived shortly after, and I quickly gave them a rundown of the night's events. They checked the back door, which was in bad shape, huge dents all over it, the handle nearly ripped off. It was clear the man had been trying to break in with something heavy. Thankfully, nothing of value had been taken, except for the tip jar we kept at the counter. It was crazy to think someone would go so far just for a couple of bucks. I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't left when I did. What if I had stood in his way? The whole situation left me shaken, and it took a long while before I was able to calm down. It was a frightening reminder of how unpredictable and dangerous the world can be. For most of my 20s, I worked various jobs, and one of them was stocking shelves in different stores. After some time, I moved to a more routine position at a popular pet store. My job required me to visit multiple locations each day. I would load up a van full of boxes, drive from store to store, restock the shelves, and then return the van to the warehouse when I was done. I started my shifts at 2 p.m., which meant I usually didn't finish until around midnight. Most nights I had to stay even later to finish up, adding an hour or two of overtime, which, in the end, paid really well. But working these late hours made it difficult to maintain a normal life. By the time I had been at the job for a few months, I was pretty used to the routine. It was around 11 p.m. one evening, and I was heading to my last store of the night. That meant I wouldn't be done until around 1 a.m. Most pet stores closed by 9 p.m., so I would always be the only one in the store. This particular location had a small back dock where I would park the van and unload the boxes, then roll them inside with a dolly. I arrived as usual and unlocked the door. I began unloading 3 large stacks of boxes and started organizing them into the right aisles. Everything seemed pretty normal at first, but then, from the front of the store, I heard a faint thud. I stopped working for a moment and listened, but after a few seconds there was no further sound. Assuming it was nothing, I went back to what I was doing. I had gotten used to strange noises in the quiet of the store, things like the air conditioning turning on or the building settling. I didn't think much of it. I was about halfway through stocking the shelves, probably about 45 minutes in, when I suddenly heard a distinct sound. A single cough echoed through the empty building. I froze instantly, my heart racing. Nobody should have been in the store with me, and if they had been, they would have said something when I entered. There shouldn't have been any reason for anyone to be there. I waited, almost in silence for a minute. My mind was racing, but I couldn't hear any more sounds. Slowly, I began to move toward the back door, taking quiet steps as I made my way outside. When I reached the back door, I locked it and felt a slight sense of relief. I went to my van, grabbed my phone, and began to dial 911. Just as I was about to make the call, I heard heavy footsteps rushing toward the door from inside the building. Then I heard the door handle jiggle as the person tried to open it. My heart skipped a beat. I knew the door was locked, but it was still unnerving to hear someone trying to get in. The situation had gone from creepy to downright terrifying. I started to call the police, but before I could speak, there was a loud bang, followed by several more hits, maybe even kicks, against the door. The man was shouting now, his voice filled with anger and desperation. He was yelling at me to let him out. I stayed silent, my mind racing, and tried to focus on calling 911. The man's cursing became more frantic as he continued to beat on the door. I could feel my adrenaline surging and my hands were shaking as I told the operator what was happening. I had to make sure the police were coming as quickly as possible. The man kept shouting, the noise growing more intense by the second. After confirming that help was on the way, I turned my van on and backed up, moving a little farther from the building. I knew I was safe, but a part of me still felt like I needed to keep an eye on the store. I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse could happen before the police got there. Thankfully, the officers arrived within just a few minutes. I met them at the door, which had fallen silent now. I handed them the key and they went inside. A couple of minutes later, they emerged, leading a man out in handcuffs. He had a large knife on him, though nothing else seemed to be missing from the store. It was the strangest thing, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why had the man been hiding in the store with a knife? And why hadn't he stolen anything? It didn't make sense. I had never seen him before, so there was no obvious reason why he would target me. The only explanation I could think of was that he must have intended harm. What scared me the most was how close I had been to something much worse happening. If I hadn't locked that back door when I did, who knows what could have happened. It was chilling to think that he could have been just a few feet away, waiting for the right moment. I was just relieved that nothing worse came of it. But it was a terrifying reminder that the danger can be closer than we think. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. For nearly 3 years, I worked the overnight shift as a drive-through attendant at a fast food restaurant. My college schedule was part-time, so working at night gave me more time during the day for schoolwork. The shifts were usually slow and uneventful, but occasionally, strange things happened. My manager tried to schedule 2 people overnight, but sometimes I'd be alone for a shift. Thankfully, most odd events occurred when I had a coworker with me, but one night, I was on my own. My coworker, who normally worked the overnight shift with me, had taken a week off for vacation, leaving me to handle 3 of the 5 nights the week alone. The first 2 nights were just like any other, with slow traffic at the drive-thru, mostly small orders, and drinks. But on the 3rd night, things started off the same. 5 to 10 customers an hour, but then there was a long gap with no cars for almost 45 minutes. I kept my headset on just in case and decided to take advantage of the break by cleaning the restaurant. I wasn't sure how long I'd been cleaning, but at one point I passed by the front counter and noticed headlights shining brightly through the front window. A car was parked right outside the doors, which was unusual. Our dining area had been closed since 9 p.m., and only the drive-thru was still open. I didn't think much of it. Maybe the driver was just parked checking directions on their phone. A few minutes later, my headset beeped, signaling a customer in the drive-thru. I quickly made my way to the window, ready to take the order. The man spoke softly and requested a large soda. I told him to pull forward while I prepared the drink. As I was pouring, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the man was looking inside the restaurant. Some customers did this, but it always felt awkward, and I couldn't understand why they did. Once the soda was ready, I handed it to him, and he gave me the exact change. I thanked him and wished him a good night. As I started cleaning again, I passed by the window and jumped back in surprise. The man was still parked outside, staring in at me. I called out, "Did you need something else, sir?" He didn't immediately respond, staring at me for a few moments before finally saying, "No," and then drove off. I realized he had been sitting there, looking at me for about 5 minutes while I was cleaning. It was unsettling, but I reminded myself that the restaurant doors were locked, so I still felt somewhat safe. I continued with my cleaning routine, wiping down the counters and reorganizing things. A few minutes later, the headset beeped again, but when I asked the customer what they wanted, there was no response. I tried again, but still no answer. Confused, I glanced at the surveillance cameras that showed the drive-thru lane. Strangely, I saw the car from earlier, but it had passed the ordering station and stopped a few feet past the window. I couldn't see what the driver was doing, but I could see movement in the grainy camera footage. My anxiety grew as I watched. Suddenly, the car jerked forward and the man began banging aggressively on the window. I was startled, but before I could react, he quickly pulled out of the drive-through lane, parked in front of the door, and rushed toward the entrance. He was holding something in his hand at first. I couldn't tell what it was, and violently tried to open the locked front doors. My heart raced, and I grabbed the store phone and dialed 911. As he continued to shake the door handles, trying to force them open, I feared the worst. After a few attempts, he finally gave up and ran back to his car, speeding away from the scene. The police arrived shortly afterward, and I explained what had happened. They took the camera footage to gather information and get the license plate number. I never heard anything more about the situation, so I'm not sure if the man was ever caught. I've always assumed he was trying to rob the place, but there's no way to know for sure. What terrified me the most was how vulnerable I was that night. Being alone made me an easy target, and something much worse could have happened. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly things can take a dangerous turn when you're alone. What would you have done in my situation? Share your thoughts and opinions on this terrifying encounter. Did you find it suspenseful? Did it keep you on the edge of your seat? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales.